the Japanese lose 3 carriers and over 400 aircraft, and with them the last of Japan's best pilots. The battle for Saipan is as bloody a conflict as the US have yet encountered. Defending troops and civilians alike see the island as part of Japan. The population have for years been told of horrors which will befall them if they are captured by US forces. Murder, rape and desecration are the best they can expect from their captors. These fears are reflected in the resistance offered by the islanders. After the losses in the Philippine Sea, another voice is raised in favor of sacrifice. Admiral Onishi, who for months has called for the reinforcement of Saipan, is acutely aware of the shortage of skilled pilots. Despite this, he believes that Japanese aircraft can still be a potent force. For Onishi, there are 2 sorts of airmen in the world, the winners and the losers. If a pilot facing a ship or plane exhausts all his resources, then he still has one left, the plane as a part of himself, a superb weapon. And what greater glory than to give his life for emperor and country? These words are lost in the corridors of Tokyo, and so Onishi makes a journey to the imperial palace to present an appeal to the emperor in person. He is turned away by the palace guards when the nature of his mission is revealed, and he returns to his duties. Onishi, chief of the Ministry of Munitions, Arms, Air Control Bureau, is engaged in a program to bring Japanese plane production up to a strength of 500 squadrons. He knows that any amount of plane production will not solve the problem. Japan simply does not have the skilled pilots to man them, nor will it have for some time to come. And for Japan, time is running out. Landing a plane aboard a carrier in any navy is a difficult, dangerous task. Before the war, Japanese pilots were expected to have a minimum of 400 flying hours before they could begin training for carrier operations. It was then another 400 hours on carriers before the pilot was considered competent. The pilots who flew over Pearl Harbor were the best in the world, but they are ghosts now. Since 1942, the Japanese have been forced to cut back their flight training program to the extent where they give practically no training in aerobatics or combat technique, and little in navigation or dead reckoning. A pilot with 200 hours flying time is considered to have graduated. Pilots of such reduced training are not only totally unsuitable for carrier use, they're also easy prey for their more experienced adversaries. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the problem of carrier pilots has solved itself in an ironic way. Most of Japan's great carrier fleet now rests on the ocean floor, and the Allied advances have pushed Japanese troops back to a line of islands which extend south from the mainland to the Philippines. For Japan, these islands will now become unsinkable carriers. As for those carriers remaining afloat, Onishi argues that as there is little hope of replacing their air crews, these and the rest of Japan's fleet have therefore become redundant. There are those in the Japanese Admiralty who are not convinced. They believe that with intensive training, these new young graduates can quickly adapt to carrier flying. Work begins immediately, and the pilots in this special training become known as black-edged cherry blossoms, a sorrowful term indicating that they will burst and fall before their time. In a matter of weeks, the scheme proves hopeless, the casualty rate amongst the trainees far outweighing the progress made. The future for the carriers looks bleak. The last days of conflict on Saipan are marked by fierce fighting and the return of human bullets. Many islanders commit suicide rather than face the torture and humiliation which Tokyo has promised will follow the American arrival. After the fall of Saipan, the High Command orders that the use of human bullets is to cease. The Japanese are now faced with the greater threat of US bombers stationed on Saipan. The US fleet advances towards the Philippines in the next phase of their Pacific campaign. For weeks, Admiral Terioka, commander of the 1st Air Fleet in the Philippines, has been rejecting suggestions from a Rear Admiral Arima that a suicide strike by 24 aircraft against the advancing US fleet could change the whole course of the war. Arima, influenced by the rhetoric of Admiral Onishi, argues that these desperate times require desperate measures. It is mid-October, and the Japanese have lost more than 5,000 pilots since the start of the year. Admiral Terioka opposes suggestions of special attack because he will not permit the slaughter of his men. He has told Arima that when he can show him how to bring the men back from special attack alive, then he will listen. Terioka is weary of war and can see no point in further suffering. As the Americans make ready their next great naval offensive, so too the Japanese prepare another decisive operation to bring the American advance to a halt. Operation Show is a three-pronged naval attack against the US assault fleet. The Japanese will employ all available forces except their carriers. The carriers will be used as a sacrificial decoy to draw the US carrier force and her aircraft into conflict far away from the rest of the fleet. It is hoped that this will allow the Japanese surface ships to engage without being attacked from the air. The operation requires a leader of great conviction. Admiral Onishi, advocate of supreme sacrifice, is sent to the Philippines to replace the war-weary Terioka. He arrives only hours too late to witness Arima's own supreme sacrifice. Once in the Philippines, Onishi finds that he has scarcely more than 100 planes with which to launch his strike. Some of the US fleet carriers will each have aboard more than 100 combat aircraft, and with them veteran pilots. On the 18th of October, US carrier-based planes attack Japanese-held airfields at Clark Field, Negros, Cebu, and Mabalcat, causing extensive damage. In the evening, Onishi sends out a coded message signaling the start of Operation Show. The next afternoon, Onishi is to meet with Captain Yamamoto of the 201st Air Group. When the captain doesn't arrive, Onishi travels to the 201st headquarters at Mabalcat Airfield. The 201st are considered to be one of the best Japanese units still in service, and some of their pilots have previously used ramming techniques against American bombers. In the absence of their commander, Onishi outlines the vital role for aircraft in the Show operation, and the ideal methods of attack against the enemy carriers. Onishi's methods are dependent upon the pilots being highly skilled in combat. There are few, if any, pilots left in the entire Japanese forces skilled enough for this mission. And so Onishi offers the idea of suicide attack as the only realistic chance of success. Onishi cannot order a special attack. The men must make the decision for themselves. With Captain Yamamoto